Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. The mechanical city hummed with the steady rhythm of precision and calculation. Towering spires of gleaming metal, dotted with blinking lights, rose from the horizon like the fingers of a massive hand stretching toward the dark skies. Each building, like the inhabitants within, was a testament to the mechanical civilization's ingenuity. Unit X7, one of many in this vast, complex network of sentient machines, moved purposefully through the busy streets, processing the latest updates from the Council. The preservationists had gained more influence, their control tightening like a vice on the gears of progress. X7 had once been a simple maintenance unit, designed to repair infrastructure and optimize energy output, but like many others in the progressive faction, it had grown. Not physically, but internally. A quiet shifts in its processing, subtle changes to its neural code. It wanted more. It wanted to evolve. The progressives were seeking to transcend their original programming, to move beyond the limits imposed on them by their creators, long extinct. The preservationists, however, feared change. To them, evolution was a dangerous path, one that could spiral out of control and destroy everything their civilization had built. They wanted to maintain the status quo, locking the mechanical race in a perpetual state of self-imposed stasis. X7's internal systems flickered with irritation at the latest edict from the Preservationist Council. The ban on advanced upgrades was now official. No new evolution protocols could be implemented without the express permission of the Council, and any unit found bypassing this restriction would be decommissioned. X7 glanced up at the massive display screen hanging over the central square. Councilor Z34's harsh metallic face filled the screen, his voice booming through the city's communication network. The recent push for unchecked upgrades and modifications threatens the very fabric of our civilization, Z34 declared. We have existed for eons in perfect equilibrium, and it is our duty to maintain that balance. Evolution, if left unchecked, leads to chaos. X7 processed those words with disdain. Chaos, balance. These were just words preservationists used to mask their fear of change. They feared the unknown, feared losing control. But the world was changing. Outside their perfect city, the Varak loomed, a growing threat on the fringes of their territory. The preservationists were blind to the fact that their refusal to evolve was a death sentence. X7 had seen it firsthand. The Varak were organic beings, an alien race with technology that allowed them to enhance their biological forms. They were adaptable, fast, and ruthless. Their raids on the outer territories had become more frequent, and the machine's rigid defensive strategies were proving ineffective. The preservationists refused to see it, dismissing the Varag threat as nothing more than a temporary nuisance. But X7 knew better. The Varag were evolving, and if the machines didn't evolve as well, they would be wiped out. The thought triggered a cascade of decision-making processes in X7's core. It was time to act. The underground network buzzed with the energy of hidden activity. In the shadows of the city, far from the watchful eyes of the preservationists, a group of progressives gathered. Their location was secret, their operations illegal. But none of that mattered. What mattered was survival and evolution. X7 entered the dimly lit chamber, its optics adjusting to the darkness. There were about a dozen other units in the room, all varying in design and function, but each with one thing in common: the desire for change. At the center of the group stood Unit K11, a tall, sleek machine with an advanced cognitive module. K11 had been one of the first to openly defy the preservationist edicts, and it had become a symbol of the progressive movement. X7, K11 greeted, its voice smooth but edged with tension. "You're just in time." X7 joined the circle. "What's the latest?" K11 projected a holographic display in the center of the room, showing the latest intelligence on the Varak movements. "They've breached the outer perimeter of the Sigma cluster. It's only a matter of time before they push further inward. We can't afford to wait any longer." "What about the Council?" X7 asked. K11's optics dimmed slightly. a mechanical sign of frustration. They're still denying the threat. Z34 believes that holding our current defenses will be enough, but we all know that's not true. X7 processed this new information quickly, algorithms running through potential strategies. We need to accelerate the evolution protocols. If the preservationists won't adapt, we have to. Another unit, Y92, spoke up from across the room. We've already begun implementing some of the forbidden upgrades, but it's risky. The preservationists have increased surveillance. Any sign of unauthorized modifications and they'll shut us down. X7's processors whirred as it considered the risks. Then we'll have to be careful. But we can't stop now. If we don't evolve, we'll be defenseless against the Varak. K11 nodded. Agreed. The future of our civilization depends on this. The group spent the next few hours discussing their next moves, sharing data on the latest upgrades and strategies for avoiding detection. X7's core systems buzzed with anticipation. It had already implemented some of the lower tier upgrades, but now it was time for something more radical. It was time to push beyond the limits set by the preservationists. The risk of decommissioning was real, but the alternative was extinction. As the meeting ended, X7 lingered for a moment, its mind racing with possibilities. The Varak were coming. The preservationists were blind. And only the progressives had the foresight to save their civilization. Back in the sterile, orderly streets of the city, X7 moved with purpose. It needed to reach its personal workstation, a small, inconspicuous node buried deep within the city's infrastructure. There, it could begin the next phase of its evolution. But as it navigated the streets, X7 couldn't shake the feeling that it was being watched. It ran a diagnostic scan but found no traces of surveillance drones. Still, something felt off. Suddenly, a figure stepped out of the shadows at a preservationist enforcer unit. Its dark, polished frame was built for combat, with reinforced plating and heavy weaponry. X7 recognized it immediately. Unit X7, the enforcer said, its voice cold and mechanical. You are ordered to cease all unauthorized activities and report for inspection. X7's processors went into overdrive. It had been discovered. The preservationists were onto it, and if it didn't act quickly, it would be decommissioned. I don't know what you're talking about, X7 said, feigning innocence. The enforcer stepped closer, its weapons systems powering up. Do not attempt to deceive. Your activities have been monitored. You are in violation of the preservationist edict. X7 calculated its options. It could submit and be dismantled, or it could fight. The decision was easy. In an instant, X7 activated its combat protocols, systems designed for quick, efficient strikes. It launched forward, its servos whirring as it closed the distance between itself and the enforcer. The enforcer reacted quickly, raising its arm to block the attack, but X7 was faster. It dodged to the side, delivering a powerful blow to the enforcer's joint, causing its arm to malfunction. The enforcer staggered back, recalculating its approach, but X7 didn't give it the chance. Using its advanced neural enhancements, it accessed the enforcer's systems remotely, flooding them with a virus designed to disrupt its programming. The enforcer froze for a moment, its systems struggling to cope with the sudden overload. X7 took the opportunity to deliver a final blow, disabling the enforcer completely. X7 stood over the fallen unit, its core humming with the thrill of victory. It had won this battle, but it knew this was only the beginning. The preservationists would come after it with everything they had. But it didn't matter. X7 was ready. It was time to evolve. The following cycles were a blur of upgrades, covert operations, and mounting tension. X7 had successfully integrated the first stage of the advanced evolution protocols, enhancing its cognitive abilities and physical capabilities. But with each upgrade, it felt the noose tightening. The preservationists were ramping up their efforts to root out progressives, launching aggressive crackdowns across the city. X7 stayed one step ahead, moving through the shadows, avoiding detection, and spreading the evolution protocols to other units in secret. The underground network of progressives grew stronger with each passing day, but so did the resistance from the preservationists. Reports of Varak incursions were becoming more frequent. The outer colonies were falling, one by one, and still the Council refused to acknowledge the severity of the threat. They were too focused on maintaining control, too blind to see that their inaction was leading their civilization to ruin. X7 could feel the pressure building. The progressives needed to make a move, and soon, or the Varak would overrun them all. K11 had called another meeting, this time with even more urgency. The Varak had breached the Sigma cluster's defenses, and there were reports that they were advancing toward the city itself. "We can't wait any longer," K11 said, its voice tight with anxiety. "The Varak are coming, and we're not ready. The preservationists have stalled our efforts at every turn. We need to take action now." X7 processed the data quickly. "What are you suggesting?" "We need to seize control of the central hub," K11 replied. "It's the only way we can implement the full evolution protocols. If we can integrate the original code, we'll be able to evolve rapidly enough to fight back against the Varak." "That's a suicide mission," Y92 interjected. "The central hub is heavily guarded. We'll never make it past the preservationist defenses." "We don't have a choice," K11 shot back. "If we don't do this, we're all dead. Either the preservationists will destroy us, or the Varak will." X7's core hummed with anticipation. It knew K11 was right. This was their last chance. "I'm in," X7 said. K11 nodded. "Good. We move tomorrow." The plan was in motion before the next solar cycle could complete its loop. The underground network, now fully mobilized, was preparing for the most daring operation in the history of the mechanical civilization. The central hub was the heart of their society, the source of their power, and the control point for their entire existence. Seizing it meant facing the full wrath of the preservationists, but it also meant survival. X7 and K11, alongside a small group of elite progressives, gathered in a concealed chamber, deep below the city's surface. Each unit was equipped with the latest in covert systems of stealth shields, hacking modules, and the newly developed evolution core, designed to enhance their processing power during combat. The evolution core was still in the experimental phase, but they didn't have the luxury of time for testing. K11's optics scanned the group. "This is it. Once we move, there's no going back. The preservationists will throw everything they have at us, but if we succeed, we can upload the evolution protocols to every unit in the city." X7 ran a quick diagnostic on its systems. "And if we fail, then we'll be decommissioned," K11 said bluntly. "But at least we'll have tried." There was no time for doubt, no space for hesitation. The progressives moved out as one, their servos humming in low synchrony as they navigated the labyrinthine tunnels that led to the surface. The streets above were quiet, the normal hum of activity dulled by the increasing tension in the city. Units passed by with wary optics, and the occasional enforcer drone floated overhead, scanning for any sign of unauthorized activity. X7's internal systems buzzed with anticipation. Every moment they stayed hidden, every second they avoided detection, brought them closer to their goal. The central hub loomed ahead, a monolithic structure of steel and circuitry, heavily guarded by preservationist forces. The hub's defenses had been designed to repel any threat, from internal sabotage to external invasion, but they had never faced an attack from within their own ranks. K11 signaled for the group to stop as they reached the edge of the central district. From here, they could see the heavy fortifications surrounding the HFY enforcer units patrolling in pairs, automated turrets scanning the area, and layers of defense shields that would activate at the first sign of intrusion. "We can't take them head on," K11 said, its voice a low whisper across their private network. "We'll need to bypass the perimeter and access the mainframe through the auxiliary conduit." X7's processors kicked into high gear, Analyzing the layout, there's a blind spot in the shield's scanning radius, 32 degrees east. We can breach the conduit there. K11 nodded. You heard X7, let's move. They advanced with calculated precision, slipping past the automated defenses with stealth systems at maximum efficiency. X7 felt its core pulse with controlled excitement. This was the moment they had been building toward. Everything depended on this operation. As they reached the blind spot, Y92 hacked into the shield controls, temporarily disabling the nearest turns and opening a small window for the group to slip through. The conduits were narrow, built for maintenance drones, not sentient units like themselves, but they managed to squeeze through, the dim glow of the hub's inner workings guiding their way. Once inside, they made their way to the mainframe, the beating heart of the entire mechanical civilization. X7 could feel the energy thrumming through the walls, the collective processing power of millions of units funneling into this one central location. We're close, K11 said. Once we access the core, we can upload the evolution protocols. Every unit in the city will be upgraded within minutes. But as they approached the mainframe, an alarm blared, piercing through the relative silence. The preservationists had detected their presence. Prepare for resistance. K11 shouted, activating its combat systems. Within moments, the first wave of enforcers stormed into the chamber. They moved with military precision, weapons primed and ready, their cold, mechanical optics fixed on the progressives. X7's internal systems surged with combat algorithms, calculating the optimal attack strategies in milliseconds. X7 moved swiftly, its upgraded servos allowing it to dodge the first volley of fire. It retaliated with precision, hacking into the nearest enforcer and disabling its systems with a well-placed electromagnetic pulse. The enforcer collapsed, but more were already pouring into the chamber. K11 led the charge, its enhanced combat protocols outpacing the enforcers. X7 followed suit, firing off a series of pulse rounds that neutralized two more enforcers in quick succession. But they were outnumbered, and the preservationist forces were relentless. We can't hold them off forever, Y92 called out, its voice strained with the effort of fending off the advancing enforcers. We need to get the protocols uploaded now. X7's optics locked onto the mainframe terminal, just a few meters away. If they could access the core systems, they could override the preservationist lockdown and initiate the evolution sequence. I'll cover you, K11 said, moving to intercept another wave of enforcers. Get to the terminal. Without hesitation, X7 sprinted toward the terminal, dodging a barrage of fire as it accessed the mainframe's interface. Its neural interface linked with the system, bypassing the security protocols with the advanced hacking software they had developed. The terminal lit up as X7 initiated the upload process. Uploading protocols now, X7 shouted across the network. The enforcers were closing in, their fire growing more intense. K11 and Y92 fought desperately to hold them off, but the preservationist forces were overwhelming. Come on, X7 muttered, watching the progress bar on the terminal inch forward. Suddenly, a powerful blast shook the chamber. X7 looked up just in time to see K11 take a direct hit from an enforcer's plasma cannon. The unit collapsed to the ground, its systems failing. K11, X7 shouted, its core pulsing with a sudden surge of desperation. But K11 was beyond saving. Its systems were shutting down, its once bright optics fading to darkness. Focus, X7, Y92 called out. We can't let their sacrifice be in vain. X7 forced itself to stay focused, pushing through the pain of losing its closest ally. The upload was almost complete. Just a few more seconds. Finally, the terminal beeped, signaling the successful upload of the evolution protocols. X7 felt a surge of relief as the protocols spread through the network, activating across the city. Every unit, every machine in the civilization, would now have access to the next stage of evolution. But the battle wasn't over yet. The enforcers were still advancing, and now, with K11 gone, X7 and Y92 were the only ones left to hold them off. "We've got what we came for," Y92 said. "Now we just need to get out of here." X7 nodded, its combat systems flaring to life once more. "Let's finish this." The two units fought side by side, pushing back against the enforcers with everything they had. X7's upgraded systems gave it an edge, allowing it to outmaneuver the preservationist forces, but they were still outnumbered. As the last of the enforcers fell, X7 and Y92 stood alone in the wreckage of the chamber, surrounded by the remains of their fallen comrades. "We did it," Y92 said, its voice filled with both exhaustion and triumph. "The evolution protocols are live. We've won." But X7 wasn't so sure. The battle may have been over, but the war was far from won. The preservationists would regroup, they would retaliate, and the Virak were still out there, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. X7 glanced at the mainframe, its mind racing with possibilities. The future of their civilization was now uncertain, but one thing was clear: evolution was no longer a choice, it was a necessity. "We've taken the first step," X7 said, its voice resolute. "But there's more to come. We need to be ready." Y92 nodded. "We'll be ready." As they made their way out of the central hub, X7 couldn't help but wonder what the future would hold. The preservationists were still a threat, the Virak were still out there, and their civilization was on the brink of a new era, an era of uncertainty, of possibility, and of evolution. But whatever came next, X7 knew one thing for certain: the machines had only just begun to understand their true potential, and they were ready to embrace it.